had an old saying when he was a child, and he had a dream, and the dream actually came true, say, the following day or a couple of days after, and she said, "That's your dream out now." Well, I think in his case, dreams really have come true for him, even if it's a bit late in the day, because he's 69 years of age. He's sold, I think it's about 5 million copies of his first book, which many of you I'm sure have read. It's called Angela's Ashes. Also earned him a Pulitzer Prize. Now, his new book is called Tis. It's just out. It's also racing up the bestseller lists. Will you welcome, please, Mr. Frank McCourt.
Pat, you're very welcome. Thank you. Thank you so much.
The book is in the news, of course. It's got some good reviews, some bad reviews, some envious reviews, some begrudging reviews, some rave reviews. So we'll talk about that in a few minutes. But Angela's Ashes, the movie, is also very much in the pipeline, isn't it?
I saw it a few weeks ago.
Yeah, why can't we see it yet?
Oh, well, the producers that keep playing the cards close to their chest. It's not, it hasn't been released yet. It won't be released in the States at Christmas Day. They'll forget their turkeys and go see Angela's Ashes. Yeah. And it'll be here in January.
They're after the Oscars, aren't they?
Oh, yeah. That's why they release it the week before the end of the year.
Just to get it into the year,
just
to qualify.
To get it into the cinemas.
And it'll still be hot.
It'll be, I hope it'll be hot.
Yeah, what do you think
light a candle.
Yeah.
It is lovely. It's Emily Watson and Robert Carlyle are brilliant. And the children, the 3 boys playing me from different parts of Ireland are enchanting. They when they came to Ireland, they put out casting calls for various men, women, and children. They did about 7,000 auditions in Limerick, Cork, Dublin, and Ennis, I believe. So, and people were flocking to audition for the movie. And what they got is very authentic. It's very true to the book.
Yeah. Did the movie move you?
Oh yeah, there were moments there when I was looking at it, and it's a very strange experience to write a book, and then first of all to write a book and then see how people receive it in various places. And generally, Angela's Ashes was received very well all around the world. And then to have it made into a movie, and to look at this movie, and to see the city you grew up in, and the neighbor, and the reenactment of your life. And it's hard to know. There were moments in it when I felt I was being drawn into the screen, or that the screen was coming towards me, and there were some tough Hollywood-type producers there were weeping. But there's laughter too, so I don't know of any other writer who's had this experience.
Yeah. Did you feel yourself at any point when some of the scenes, did you feel ashamed at any point?
No. There are moments there. There were things that a director will do that I would disagree with slightly, but I didn't feel any shame. No.
Yeah. Now, the new book is about America rather than about Limerick, although Limerick pervades everything that you are, I think it's fair to say. One thing that strikes me about your attitude to America when you arrived there, you were envious of Americans on all sorts of levels.
Well, the envy develops. It's a deadly sin, you know. Pride, covetousness, lust, envy, gluttony, and sloth. So the envy started in Limerick because when you grow up in the lanes like this, you look. I grew up in various Roden Lane at the top of Barrackhill and Schoolhouse Lane and various lanes, and I would see people in Ballinacurra or O'Connell Avenue or O'Connell Street, and they look well off. And I looked at the boys going to the Crescent College, which was a Jesuit school. I envy them. They had bicycles, they had suits, they had shoes, and they looked well fed, and they had nothing to worry about. They knew when they get home they'd have food and they had clothes and they had nothing to worry about. So I envied that. I know it's a sin, but I did it.
The quality of your envy in America was different. It seemed like all American kids had nice straight teeth.
Oh, they did, yeah.
They were pimple-free. They got the girl. You didn't get the girl.
Well, the people I saw when I was working this menial job in the Hotel Biltmore, I was the one who went around and cleaned up the ashtrays and swept the floor and then went in and cleaned the toilets. And I would look at these the young men from Harvard and Yale and Princeton, and the young women from Bryn Mawr and Radcliffe and Swarthmore. And they were the golden people of America. And I was 19 years old, ill-equipped, no education, and I looked like something the cat brought in, with infected eyes and bad teeth. And I envied them because it seemed to me they were my age, 19 and 20, and they were on top of the world, and I wanted what they had. And I think at the back of my mind I set out not to get what they had, but to make my way in America, because the story, is a story of bewilderment and making your way, opening a door in New York.
There's a kind of bizarre contradiction about what's happened to you. Your book, Angela's Ashes, is about poverty, and it's made you a millionaire.
Well, God did it. It's not my fault.
Isn't there a lovely irony about that?
There is. That's the irony. And I'm in a state of, I'm usually, I go under a state of paralysis and numbness of what has happened to me. Because when I started to write this book in Pennsylvania, I retired from 30 years of teaching, and I said, I want to write this book because I wanted to show the face of poverty. There's very little writing about poverty. I think the best Irish book I ever read about poverty was James Plunkett's Strumpet City, which came out in the 1960s. And then they talk about dignity. I wanted to show the face of poverty. And then I was teaching for 30 years when there really wasn't much time for writing. Because when you have 5 classes a day, 5 days a week, there isn't time.
But the transition from this envy of America, of wanting what they had, of being almost genetically, and we'll be talking about genetics in a while, kept out of this. You didn't look right, you didn't look American, you didn't have an education, and then something happened that allowed that transition.
What I know now is now, I didn't know anything. I understand more now than I did then. I understand what the fortunate thing that I had when I arrived in America was that I knew English. I see people now who come to New York and the States in general who know no English and take on all kinds of jobs. They're washing dishes. They'll do anything. They'll drive taxis and they'll support their families. At least I had English, and I realized then at that time I didn't understand, but I had to make my way.
There was at the beginning of your time in America a fierce loneliness, and it drove you to the bars. Now, one of the things that you had that other nationalities mightn't have had was the Irish bar in every block.
The Irish community on 3rd Avenue, from 42nd Street up to 96th Street was one long Irish bar, and there was a community. There was a danger of moving into that kind of cultural ghetto and staying there, as many of them did. You know, you could be, and there was that loneliness. That's why so many went into the bars and people who were not particularly addicted to drink became addicted to drink because of the loneliness. And I was in danger of that, except that the Chinese invaded Korea, and America turned to me and drafted me into the army and sent me to Germany for 2 years. And when I came back, I went to New York University.
That was under the GI Bill, was it?
The GI Bill, yeah.
Now, you didn't have the high school education to get you into university, so how did you scam your way in?
I was finished with Leamy School when I was 14. There was no hope of ever going to the Christian Brothers Secondary School or anything like that when you went to Leamy's. I don't know of anybody from my generation in Leamy's who went to secondary school. So I I got desperate. I didn't know what to do with myself. Here I am in America, I have no education. But I did something very dangerous for a young Irishman one day. I began to ask myself the meaning of it all. And I didn't have the intellect to grapple with a question like that. So I walked across Bleecker Street, Washington Square, and there was NYU, and I asked where's the admissions office, and I went and applied. And they let me in. I told them, well, I was 22 by then, and I'd been in the army for 2 years, training dogs, which is a very good training for becoming a teacher. They let me in on a year's probation, provided I maintained and be average. Even though they were appalled, maybe amused at the idea that I didn't have a high school education.
The effrontery of you, really.
It was, and I wasn't aggressive like that. I was very timid.
How did you cope again with the envy of these Americans?
My envy of them?
Yeah, the splendid Americans who they felt it was their birthright to be in NYU.
Yeah, it was. It was their birthright. It was their birthright. But I didn't know that I had to adjust to everything. That's what it was. A constant. The army helped me because I was in there and I had 3 meals a day and I had a uniform and bedding and food and so on. So I was a private and I became a corporal, which is a huge step for me. I became a corporal over 90 other candidates for corporal. So then when I went to New York University, I began to feel a little more confident. Especially in literature classes, when the subject of Irish literature would come up, Joyce might be mentioned, O'Casey might be mentioned, and all heads would turn to me, the expert. And I didn't know my arse from my elbow about Joyce or O'Casey.
But they didn't either.
They didn't know. They didn't know. So, Mr. McCourt, what do you think of Joyce's Dublin? And I'd say something, and they'd all look at me very respectfully. I was a fraud.
In so many ways, when you came to America, you were an innocent abroad.
No.
Okay, you were somewhat streetwise from your growing up in Limerick, but you were an innocent abroad. I mean, your attitude to sex, and the Americans quite liberal about sex.
Yeah.
You had zero experience.
Zero. Practically zero. Well, it wasn't that liberal in those days, Pat, because that was the 1950s, the Eisenhower era, just before the beat movement, the beatnik movement came around, and it was the era of the man in the grey flannel suit, and everybody was uptight and respectable. The war had ended, and people were recovering from it. There was a kind of rigidity in America. There was censorship. Yeah, you couldn't get D.H. Lawrence.
But at the same time, people had opportunity. They had
there was more opportunity.
They had the motor car.
You see, that's one of the. If you're if you go to a university the way I did, there's a more liberal atmosphere. That's one of the reasons why Limerick, of all the cities in Ireland, Limerick didn't have a university, which kept it back a bit from the others, Galway, Cork, and Belfast and Dublin. Limerick was denied a university, which meant there was no institute where the spirit of free and critical inquiry was encouraged.
Yeah. Eventually, you became a teacher, and in one of the schools where you were teaching, I mean, you were told, listen, no matter what you tell them, it's going to be news to them. They know absolutely nothing.
Yeah. When you went to vocational high schools in New York, there was a movie. The first job I got was in a place called McKee Vocational High School, and there was a movie came out at that time called The Blackboard Jungle.
Yeah.
And it was very dramatic. It had Glenn Ford, and there's violence in the classroom, which wasn't far from the truth. So I got this job in the school, and I knew nothing. I knew nothing. I'd had college courses in literature, but how do you go into 5 classes of American adolescents who are there, and they were in many ways they were much more mature than I was, much more experienced in the ways of love and romance than I was, and they would often embarrass me. And of course, but I think what saved me is when I opened my mouth, they'd say, "Yo, teach, you Scotch or something?" and I'd explain that I was Irish, and that created a bridge. The accent created a bridge, and they were very interested in my exotic background from Limerick.
Yeah.
What kind of music I listened to, and what kind of school I went to.
Now, eventually, you did get the All-American Girl.
Yeah,
your first wife.
Yeah.
And it seemed that she wanted the things that you might have wanted had you stayed in Limerick. Lace curtains.
Yeah.
Nice things.
Yeah.
But your horizons had moved on,
well, in
fact.
I wanted to be middle class. If you grew up in the lanes of Limerick and you looked around you, the Ennis Road, which was a middle class or upper middle class area, or Balnacar or the North Circular Road, we wanted to be like them. We wanted to be comfortable. That's what I aspired to. But absolutely, you get older and you see other things. When I was in the late 50s or the early 60s, I would go around to places in Greenwich Village and see people like Allen Ginsberg reciting their poetry and Jack Kerouac, and I got to parties where everybody is smoking pot and drinking this hideous wine called Thunderbird, and I was exposed to this artistic ferment that was going on in New York, and I wanted to be part of that, but I was afraid. The other side of me said, get a steady job, because I was afraid of the poverty that I came
That's what
from.
your wife wanted. Eventually,
yeah.
You did what you hated your father for doing. Walked out on his family. You walked out.
Well, he walked out and never. And when I walked out, it was because of the incompatibility of the marriage. But I never abandoned my daughter.
Yeah.
Though I always gave my child support, and I saw her all the time. So it was an entirely different story. Yeah. And it wasn't drink that made me walk out.
But looking back at it now, do you see the parallels? That people say there is a predisposition to do something, and maybe you were predisposed to do that too.
No. If I'd met a woman more compatible with my ideas, more flexible, more adventurous, maybe. But my wife, and it wasn't her fault. It wasn't my fault. We came from. My mother used to say, "Why don't you stick with your own? Marry a nice Irish Catholic girl." Well, I didn't. And she complained that me and my brothers, none of us marry a nice Irish Catholic girl. There's nothing in this family but Jews and Protestants. Protestants, Jews. Every time I cross the floor, I'm tripping over little Jews and Protestants. And then the kids would come running to you. Dad, what was Nana doing to me in the middle of the night, pouring water all over my head? So it was just, she came from one end of the American spectrum and I came from Limerick.
Yeah. Your mother, did you like her?
Oh, sure.
I mean, it seems to be combat all the way, really.
Of course it was. You look at the average family. Tolstoy said all happy families are happy in the same way. But all unhappy families are unhappy in different ways. I think I used to get irritated with her because she succumbed to defeat, to depression. And I used to say, come on, get up, we'll go out. And I used to take her out. I used to take her.
Was she burdened with the memories? Because reading Angela's Ashes...
It wasn't until she died I realized the intensity, the horror of her life. Yeah. That she'd had 6 children in 5.5 years, and that 3 of them died in that period. And then when she died, you think about it. You have to lose your mother before you realize what she was. Before you realize her value.
You maintained contact with your first wife and your child, and she had her own difficulties, which I believe she's come out of, and she has her own child.
She was a deadhead.
She was a druggie and...
Oh, no, she wasn't.
She was a Grateful Dead.
She followed the Grateful Dead around, yeah.
Okay.
And I suppose she did her share. But
but she's straight right now. Okay. Yeah. You had a second wife and a third wife, who happily is with us tonight.
Yeah. That's perfection.
Your third wife is...
It's my lucky number.
Third time lucky. Okay. You've been criticised in some quarters for sort of not writing about your second wife. You've described it as a 2-minute affair.
When I think of all the things I didn't write about, when I think of the schools that I worked in, the teaching was the most significant thing in my life. And there were no Fashion Industries High School, Sewer Park High School, Chelsea Vocation. I didn't write about these. That was my ongoing university. And if I made a mistake in a marriage, I made a mistake in a marriage, and I wasn't going to.
But you were never going to get married again after number 2.
Oh yeah, that's right. I took a vow of celibacy and abstinence. I was living in San Francisco, and I decided I couldn't take San Francisco anymore. And I was on the plane coming back. I said, when I go back, I was getting an apartment in New York. I live in this apartment with a little narrow cot with a hard mattress and a single light bulb with no shade on it. And all you'll find in my refrigerator is a carafe of water and a loaf of hard bread.
This is obviously the religious thing coming into your life again.
That's right. I'm a closet monk.
I know that you don't have a lot of time for the organised religion of your childhood, and I don't know if you have a lot of time for the Catholic Church in America or in Ireland. But you do seem to have some sort of time for people who are spiritual.
I'm fascinated with faith. Right. What I'm doing. I'm reading a lot about Saint Teresa of Avila and Saint John of the Cross and their relationship, because I want to write a play about them, because they were both threatened by the Spanish Inquisition. And so I've discovered Saint Teresa. This is another subject. She was Jewish, so I'm fascinated with that part of it. So I'm fascinated with I read the lives of the saints all the time. If you poke me in the middle of the night and say, "What are you reading?" I said, "The Lives of the Saints." That's right.
All right. We have a couple of people want to say something. That's Jerry Hannon. Now you kind of are involved in an ongoing battle with Frank.
It must be
McCourt.
One-sided. I don't know anything about it.
Yeah, but I mean,
yes,
you wrote a book called...
everything about it, Frank. You have been peddling lies about Limerick for the last 2.5 years. In every television station, in every newspaper, you have told lies about Limerick, about your mother, about Teresa Carmody, about Willie Harold. You have done nothing but lied. You are a liar. You are a self-confessed liar. Teresa Carmody was 3 days away from her death when you wrote in your book that you had sexual intercourse with her. You never mentioned anywhere in your book that it was with her consent. Was it with her consent, Frank?
Frank?
Was it with her consent?
There was no Teresa Carmody. It's a made-up name.
It's not a made-up name. You named her mother. You're going to tell more lies now, are you?
There was no...
Okay, that's number one.
Teresa Carmody... Just a minute, we're not finished.
Teresa Carmody first.
Teresa Carmody is a made-up name.
It is not a made-up name.
The young lady, you will never know her name.
You are a liar. You are a liar. Number 2, Frank McCourt.
Why are you so obsessed with me?
Because, Frank, Jesus Christ up in heaven.
How old are you, by the way?
How
old are you? How old are you?
Irrelevant. You hammered your mother. You picked her as a lazy,
what I did is so you could be virtuous.
Good-for-nothing whore. That's what you depicted your mother as. You owe your mother an apology. Teresa Carmody's parents, Teresa Carmody's family at least, are looking into this programme tonight.
Jerry,
to owe her an apology. And number, sorry, I drove from Limerick. I drove from Limerick tonight to make 3 points, and I want to make them.
Make the third.
You've censored me before, Pat. You're not censoring me again.
When did I censor
Number
you, by the
3,
way?
you censored me, you interviewed me, you gave me a 20-minute interview, and without explanation, you chopped it on your radio programme.
We often chop pieces for length. Absolutely.
Number 3, number
practice.
3, Frank. Why, if this miserable childhood that you had in Limerick, this so-called miserable childhood that you've peddled your lies all over the world, right? Miserable lanes of Limerick, miserable childhood, miserable people of Limerick, misery, 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 the whole flipping way. If that's the case, why did you not discuss your well-paid employment with Jackie Brosnan? Why did you not discuss your years with St. Joseph's Spy Scout movement? You never discussed it.
Okay, but the same reason
St.
I
Joseph's
didn't
Spy
discuss
Scout was the elite
various
Spy
schools
Scout
that
movement.
You've had
of
enough
Limerick.
time now.
Hang on, Jerry, can I just
You
ask
are a liar.
Okay, you've made your point.
You're a liar.
Jerry, can I ask you one question? And I think it's the reason Frank was asking how old you were, is that he's writing of a time from before you were born.
Frank, Pat,
I mean, isn't that so?
You're a journalist, you've heard of research. I have interviewed over 70 people that are contemporaries of Frank McCourt. I interviewed Moira Gallagher. She describes Angela McCourt as the angel of the lanes.
Can I also suggest to you that the late Jim Kemmy thought that Frank's book was an accurate description of the way things were in the Limerick of their mutual youth?
Jim Kemmy, with all due respect to him, was a very close friend of Frank McCourt.
No, he wasn't. I didn't meet him until just before he died.
He was.
I met him just before he died.
I can't believe a
so
word
you're
out
a liar.
Your mouth. You're a liar.
I met him just before he died.
I can't believe a word
I didn't know
out I'm sorry,
Jim Kemmy. Jim Kemmy.
You're a liar.
I'm not sure who the audience are applauding, by the way, but I must let Frank get back in from the charges to respond to the charges you've made.
The name Teresa Carmody was one I made up because I was not going to name the actual person.
Did you also make up the name of the girl in Bavaria? You seem to have a morbid fascination for necrophilia.
I do. I like women.
For necrophilia.
If you don't mind, I like women.
Necrophilia.
I love women. I'm mad about women. I've been married 3 times, and the one I'm married to now is going to last forever because I'm infatuated with women.
Women
and
who are
to protect
3
my
minutes
own
away
wife,
from
I
their
make
death.
up a false name. I don't know why you're so obsessed with me. Don't you have a life? Go ahead and live. Do something.
Women.
Go ahead. Find a cause. There are poor people in Limerick. Go and help the poor of Limerick. Don't obsess with me all the time. You're there, you're in a city in Ireland, south of Ireland, and you're obsessed with me, and I'm sure there are a few people in Limerick. When they sent out casting calls for the movie in Limerick, hundreds of people showed up. Then they brought their children to be an angel. And if they hated the book and the movie, why were they auditioning for this terrible movie?
You said Willie Harold.
Jerry.
You said Willie Harold. You said Willie Harold.
I want to go down here because there's one thing I want to ask you. And it's hang on, it's the question. It's the question. Hang on. Most people watching this have no idea of the people you're talking about because it's fine detail about Limerick. You've made your point that you think it's very inaccurate. But what I'd really like to know is why you are so obsessed. I mean, the latest book is called Tis. You're bringing out a book called Tisn't.
It's called Tis in My Ass.
Okay. I wasn't given the full title. But, okay, Tis in My Ass. I thought it was going to be called Tisn't. This current book is about America. It's about his experiences in America. Now, what are you writing? He spends his time in America reminiscing about his miserable days back in miserable Limerick. What do you know about his life in America that you're going to contradict everything?
Zero.
So why are you writing another book?
But who says my book is contradicting?
Well, Ashes was your last book, Ashes, was contradicting Angela's.
Ashes was another side of the story. It was about the people who were happy, who lived on the lanes of Limerick, my relatives.
Okay.
Okay, who were happy. They had a happy childhood.
Yes, we have a... Sure.
that Jerry Hannon didn't even write the book Ashes. It was written by a fellow by the name of Frank Hamilton.
Is that so, Jerry?
That is a total and absolute lie.
Jerry,
that is a lie.
I'd like to see you disprove that.
That is a lie.
And Frank Hamilton is in prison at the moment for sex crimes. So
that is a lie.
That is how credible Jerry Hannon is.
Is that the best? Is that the best you can come up with?
All right.
Is that the best you can come up with?
You're pathetic.
This is very much very much a limerick row.
It's a squabble.
It's a squabble, and we're going to move on because we have to meet other people. So Frank McCourt is going to stay with us for part 2, and we're going to meet someone who's got an interesting spin on why we are a bit the way we are in Ireland. I'm not sure that he can throw light on the kind of rows we generally have with each other. You never know, he might. If you want to meet Frank, he'll be at Eason's in Dublin tomorrow at 12:30, Hughes and Hughes at 5 o'clock tomorrow as well. He'll be in Limerick on Sunday and Cork on Monday. So if you've got crows to pick with Frank, you can do it in person at those locations. End of part 1. We'll be